Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the second part of my conversation with Maile Domingo. And we are going to continue talking about how important our families are and how important our faith is and how important that it is for us to use our giftedness to work the culture and to help bring this place back to a state of righteousness. So let's chat about that. Maile, welcome back to the show today.
Hi, Eva. Good to be with you.
Okay, Maile. I'm just so pleased and honored again to just continue this conversation with you because you're bringing I think what you're doing is you're bringing a breath of fresh air to the conversation because, as you know, one of the things that Hawaii Family Forum has been doing, over the course of the last 25 years is to be a voice at the state capitol for the faith community. Sometimes an easy win, sometimes a horrible loss. But it doesn't matter where we're at on that spectrum. What's important is that we do everything with grace, that we do everything with honor, that we do everything with conviction. And we ended our conversation last week on the state motto. And so what I want to do now is I want to let you finish any thoughts that you might have had on the motto, because it stopped, right? I mean, our motto today is it stops. It doesn't give the whole thing about Jesus. So why don't you kind of pull that together, and so as we jump into the conversation today.
It is. It's actually really hard to find anything about it. And so I actually found it in the old newspapers of the 1820s. Well, actually, at that time, it would have been the 1844 papers, and all written in Hawaiian. And so I found that it was just a very fascinating research. But what I believe is that it just models for us the same, that sometimes we recognize, okay, we need to return to God. Things aren't going so well. They're painful. They're hurting. Our people are hurting. And what else are we to do? And it can feel hopeless, but we cannot despair because we have the God that was victorious over even death. I mean, he was miraculously and continues to be the light of the world. And so I think our king at that time, he was blown away. He thought like, okay, what, did they truly cut my balls off?
And share with everybody, because when I heard you talking about this at one of our trainings, you talked about the flag, because at last week we talked about how they had put up the British flag. So what happened with the flags?
So Admiral Thomas came and he went to Pu'awaina, took down the British flag and elevated the Hawaiian flag. And then he gave the proclamation stating that the king had full authority over the Hawaiian constitution and its lands. Mm-hmm. And it was affirmed by a signature from Victoria, the Queen of Britain, the President of America at the time, and whoever the Prime Minister of France was at the time. And so he was blown away. And his uamau ke'ea o ka'aina I kapono was that because the people returned to righteousness, the life of the land is perpetuated. That's what, if you read the newspapers, the Hawaiian newspapers, that's what they're all saying. They're affirming. In fact, the cabinet people, they're recorded as saying it's because Hawaii, like not just the leadership, but the people return back to prayer, to mercifulness, to acknowledging the investment that God has in their very selves, in their very identity as Hawaii. And he was giving thanks. That's what that proclamation, he was praying. That was a prayer that he was proclaiming.
I love that. And there's a scripture that speaks to this, right? If my people who are
Ah.
called by my name humble themselves
So,
and seek my face, I will heal their land. And
Amen.
and Maile, I agree with you so much that our land is in dire need of healing. And I think that the way that the devil attacks today is he attacks the family. And the family, this Ohana, is so important to keeping the strength and the life of the land together, that I think we all need to wake up. We need to open our eyes and understand that the attacks that are happening against our keiki today and our kupuna, when you think about things like assisted suicide and all that, if I was the enemy, that's what I would do, right? I would attack the two precious commodities we have in family, which is our future, which is our keiki, and our past, which is our kupuna, right? And that's exactly what the devil is doing. And, so let's fast forward now. We had talked a little bit about the queen being imprisoned and how she wrote such beautiful music while she was in prison. But before she was imprisoned, she gets on a barge, one of these ships, and travels to Congress to plead her case before, our United States Congress. And in this speech, and I don't have the whole speech memorized, but I promise you one of these days, I'm probably going to memorize the whole speech because she did a fantastic job. And we have to remember that we're the only state in the entire Union of the United States that had a monarch. None of the other states had a monarch. We did. Now, some of the Native American tribes did have chiefs, but there was no monarchs as Hawaii. And so we have to remember that Hawaii was in a different place. So she goes to Congress, and in her speech, in her very impassioned speech, she said that I weep for the children of Hawaii. And when I was reading her, I still get chicken skin when I read that, because if the queen were alive today and she was to see the way that our children are being killed in the womb, the way that our kupuna are being tossed aside as if they have no value when they are journeying toward the end of their life, I think that she would still weep. And I think we need to weep. We need to weep for what's happening. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Oh, it's such a heavy-hearted thing, isn't it, to look at this and to recognize that all along the way in our journey, we have all these aches that come to us. And I think to sort of embrace the ache that every single one of us feels along our journey of life, and that it doesn't matter the outside circumstances, issues that we're facing. It really doesn't. Because what happens is that I believe that when we're pono, when we're righteously living out our dignity and saying yes to living according to our design, and to admit that we're a creature, which means we have a maker. And when we struggle with his call for us to live pono, and for our different paths and ways that we try to satisfy ourselves, and then when we don't live according to pono, there's consequences to that. And some of that is the ache. And I believe the attack upon the womb is symptomatic of the ache, because even when we annihilate the baby or we euthanize our kupuna, the ache remains. And ask anybody that's been through it, if they're courageous enough to tell the truth, it still hurts. Even if those sort of challenges are out of the picture for now, but the core of who we are within, right? The core of who we are within is still asking us, who are you? Who do you want to be? What do you want? And how do you want to live your life such that you can be pono? You can stand up in steadfastness, oni pa'a, said the queen. And you know, when she died, she left her estate, and all of the funding to her estate takes care of the orphan children of Hawaii. And so, you know, even today, her heart for the child that was hurting or abandoned or left, it still serves. And I think that's the secret. She had a gift to give.
Mhm.
And when we have a gift to give, and we're confident enough in that gift, and then we can give it, all of a sudden, the ache goes away. Why? Because the power of the sincere gift of self covers a multitude of sins. Love. The giving of ourselves is our love. And scripture tells us that love covers that multitude. And so I really think she had a secret there in her heart to weep for the children and then cause ourselves to give unto the children and their future.
I see that as a connection to Jesus, because Jesus wept, right? I mean, Jesus, when he looked out, right? That's the shortest scripture, right? In the entire Bible, is Jesus wept. When Jesus looked at this hurt that you're talking about, when Jesus saw the brokenness, he met it head on. He didn't run away. He didn't stick his head in the sand. He didn't try to politicize it. He didn't try to make it woke. He dealt with it head on. And this is what I see in what the king and queen did for their people, right? And I'm not going to erase that there might have been things that were not good in the history, but
Sure.
Everybody's history has that, right? So we're not trying to make, like you said, that everything's perfect. But I want you to address two of that I see as their misinformation that's out there about the Hawaiian culture, because I've seen it brought up, I've heard it brought up at the Capitol, and I know that you have a difference in thought. And I want to make that clear, that I understand that there's always going to be people that have a different interpretation. But I like your interpretation, which is why you're on my show and not them. So the first one is on the issue of the preciousness of children. I have heard people say that even in the Hawaiian culture, and so I'm kind of like paraphrasing what they say. They say, well, in the Hawaiian culture, you know, children that were deformed were, or if they had birthmarks or whatever, they were left on the ocean to die. So even in the Hawaiian culture, you know, it's not like they had this super preciousness about a child's existence. And I've talked with other Hawaiians that were like, yeah, no, that's kind of taken out of context. So I'd like to hear what you say. What does Maile Domingo say about this?
Wow, I think all of those things, when we see humanity operating in a barbaric way, it's because we're not listening to the voice within. We're not listening to the creator. And at that time, they were under the kapu system. And so they didn't regard the value of life. And so whatever you had to do to make your life easier so that you could survive and not get annihilated by the kapu system enforcers, you did. If that meant give up your kid for sacrifice, that's what you did. If that meant give up your kid that would be too hard to take care of, that's what you did. They were in a mentality and a mindset of survival. Do you not think that their hearts were torn apart? Like, do I choose my child's life or do I choose my life? I mean, how many of us have been in that situation where we're like, I'm going to drown or my kid is going to drown? And you're like, you're really faced with that decision. And God bless us. Sometimes we choose ourselves. I'm guilty. I'm totally guilty. I choose, you know, I'm not going to share my ice cream with my kids. I'm hiding it. You know, it can be that small, but we all know that we're guilty of even greater. And so, you know, God bless those people that made those decisions for those reasons. But what I do know is that the kupuna that share those stories, their heart ached. They lived in the ache and the guilt and the shame, because they know ultimately, guess what? That wasn't the solution. Love was. And so guess what they like to do right after? They want to have another baby.
Mhm.
I think it's something innate in us. When we have a loss, we want life.
Mhm. I agree with you 1,000%, Miley, and I don't think we're any different today. I mean, you talked about how they had to make that choice because it was either I'm going to be punished or I got to make this decision. And I don't believe in my heart that any one of those decisions was made callously. I like you, believe that people grieved, and there was probably public grieving and there might have even been private grieving. But you're right, there is a loss when you lose a child. There's a loss there, there's a hole, and you have to fill it somehow, and I think we do, the pro-life community, we do a good job of acknowledging that, because we know that women, after they have an abortion, they're broken, they need help, which is why there's great organizations, right? Rachel's Vineyard, other groups that work with women that are grieving after they make that choice. But fast forward to today, there are people that are refusing to say anything that could be construed as problematic because they don't want to be canceled. So it may not be a death, but it's still a choice they're making, that in order for me to have my YouTube channel so it doesn't get stricken, or that I don't have the IRS come after me, I'm not going to preach this from the pulpit, right? The truth is not being spoken because people are afraid. So I think that we're no different today than then. But I'm glad that you're talking about this from such a heartfelt manner and not just callously, because I think that we would be fools to say that it didn't happen. But I love that you kind of spun it a little bit bigger so people could understand what was happening. And you were really clear last week about what was happening under the Kapu system. So I think this makes people quite aware of what was happening. Now, another misinformation that I see out there, and you spoke about this too, is this idea about the Mahu culture here in Hawaii. We've all grown up here. We've heard it spoken about before. We do know that there are people that identify as Mahu, and we love them and we welcome them, and we cherish their unique giftedness as well. But that's also to say that that was a big thing in the Hawaiian culture. It was accepted and celebrated. I remember some of the pastors in the early days of same-sex marriage, they made it clear to say there's a difference between acceptance and celebration. And I think that that's what we're kind of seeing in this, right? Accepting and celebrating is two different things. So speak to that, Miley.
I think that every single one of us have desires, and our desires have a line. Sometimes they're above a certain acceptable line, and sometimes they're below a certain acceptable line. And I think depending on how we were raised, what values we were taught, and sort of the culture that we're in, I might have a line here and my friend might have a line here. So some of the things I do end up underneath her no line, but above my yes line. And so I think that the lines are blurred, as they say. But where can we go for the answers? Well, for me, I'm a creature and I was created by the Almighty. And I go to his direct source. Who am I? Why was I made? And how can I live in such a way to bring about happiness? And I think the fact that I'm a woman and I can give the sincere gift of my femininity is incredible power and an incredible gift. But likewise, when you and I look at a man who is just an image of dignified masculinity, when he offers his gift, whatever that may be. I mean, sometimes my boys they know I'm not feeling well. So they'll go, Mommy, go lie down. We'll make dinner. And they'll bring me a dish of food with a nice water or with lemon. And they'll kiss me on my head. Mommy, do you need anything? And bam, right there, their masculine gift comes. And I think the whole Mahu culture is about not recognizing the beauty of the masculine gift that men can give in all kinds of forms from their own being, from their own culture, from their own creativity. And when we can recognize the gift of masculinity and femininity, we've done it for centuries. And that's why the whole Mahu thing was a little bit of a comedy, like even as close as the 1960s, right? Before then, if you were Mahu, it was kind of a comedy and it was cute. And some of them chose to live that way. I had a Hanai sister that was a Mahu. She just lived as a guy, but she was kind of a girl too, you know? So I know that. And I think that when a society fails to recognize the gift, the sincere gift of a man, even if he has a femininity about him, it's a masculine gift. And that's what makes him a unique male. And vice versa for the women. So I think recognizing the gift is, to me, the most important. And the culture of the history of it has only recently changed. Yeah, I would say within, like, in an established way, only within the last 30 years has it been recognized. But if you look back in history and people's account of what was written of people who live that way, kind of same, like all over the world, people have chosen to indulge in their carnal desires and carnal behaviors. It isn't that different. And, you know, maybe on another time I could talk about a historical character that indulged in his carnal desires and then purified his carnal desires to serve both male and female from his masculinity.
That's good. In fact, I will keep you on my speed dial because I already know that I'm going to have you back, because so many of the issues we're facing today, as you know, people will bring up, oh, well, this is how they did it in the past. And, you know, I think that a lot of times history is rewritten, and we're seeing this happen even today, that history is rewritten to match whatever message we're trying to send today. And I think that that's wrong. I mean, what's the old saying that, you know, if you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to be honest when we're looking at historical events to say, this happened, admit if there was a problem, like things like slavery, right? Slavery was wrong. But we also have to understand that at the time slavery was happening, it wasn't wrong, right? I mean, we're looking at it through the lens of today.
They had a different context.
They had a different context. But if you read scriptures, right, when the scriptures bring up slavery and all that, the scriptures are still clear that you're supposed to treat everybody with respect and dignity, right? Masters, treat your slaves well. And I think it's because they were writing for the time, you know, they weren't writing for today. Like I had a person tell me at the Capitol one time, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about abortion. And well, they're right, because people back in those days did not rip the child from their womb into pieces and do all the things that happen during an abortion today. But I'm willing to wager that women back then had pregnancies that were unplanned. I'm sure that they had to face some of the same choices they did today. The difference was the dangling carrot of, you know, quick and easy fix wasn't there then. And so they really had to think through the consequences of everything they did. And I truly believe that's part of the problem today. There are no consequences. People can do whatever they want, right? And people applaud them, right? Because that's what it's about today. You live your truth, Maile, and I'll live my truth, and we'll all be happy. But the problem is, if there's two people living their truth, there is going to be a collision. Because there's only one truth that we believe, and that truth comes from Jesus Christ, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I love how he flows that, right? I am the way. So there is a way. In that way, there is a truth. And that truth will lead to life. And that kind of goes back to what you talked about the life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. And so it's a great way to just kind of pull everything together. Now, in this last couple of minutes, Maile, I want to just let you share your heart. You know, you're talking to people that they may be aware of what's going on, but I know that there is a sense of hopelessness. And you know that I played Mother Marianne, and Mother Marianne, she really tried to learn about the Hawaiian culture. She didn't try to get rid of it. In fact, when she got there, instead of telling the native Hawaiian girls that they couldn't wear their mu'us, she actually helped them sew new ones. You know, she really embraced the culture. And there was a saying that she had, and I had to memorize it for the play, and it's na kanaka ku'uvale aku no ika uhane. And I was told that it means the people, they're dying because they have no hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our people have hope. So let's go out with some hope, Maile. What is some hope that you can offer people?
I think that the world can get so big and overwhelming, and you have multiple sources telling you about everything that's wrong and that there is no hope. But I'm here with my sister Eva to proclaim that there is an immense amount of hope, and that everything you need, no matter what you're struggling through, everything you need, you have within, because it's been given. It's here. And so the name of my organization is Hamau Iloko, and it means the silence within. And you know, the kupuna used to say, Hamau, 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 Hamau. Like, we think they used to tell us, shut up, but but it was more of an invitation to listen. I know it's hard. I know you're hurting, but listen, go within and listen. And then just take the next step forward. And I would say that the greatest thing you can do for yourself and for the community is live with an attitude of mahalo. Mahalo for your family, mahalo for your experiences, mahalo for your trials and your challenges, mahalo for the people that have hurt you in your life, because they are causing you to grow. And then find something inside of you that you know you want to give, that you know you want to champion, and give it. Be grateful. Mahalo for it all. And then find what you want to give from within and share that with the world. Because once you give of yourself, all the pilikia often disappears.
I can't even finish up with that. There's no better way to end. We really appreciate you spending your time with Maile and I as we discussed the last 2 weeks. Make sure you like this video, that you share it, that you subscribe, hit that notification button so you'll know every time we upload a new video. And stay plugged in, because I promise you, listener and viewer, we will have Maile back to talk about how precious you are to Jesus and to us. Mahalo, everybody. We will see you next week.